Hello. Today I'm going to dispel some myths about tinnitus and hyperacusis based on my extensive research and experience, not to mention the experiences of many others I've crossed paths with in my tinnitus and hyperacusis journey. I'd also like to address TRT, which is actually the main point of this video, or tinnitus training therapy as it's called, and expose it for the scam it is, and other popular scams as well. Also, I'm going to be exposing some prominent figures in the tinnitus community as frauds, using facts and evidence that I've accumulated over the years. I'll also be giving the best free advice on what you do if you discover that you have tinnitus. So let's get started, shall we? So what is tinnitus and hyperacusis, or NOXACUSIS? To put it shortly, tinnitus is an invisible condition which can only be experienced by the sufferer. To quote Wikipedia, tinnitus is the perception of sound when no corresponding external sounds are present. Tinnitus is a symptom which can be caused by many underlying conditions, including hearing damage, nerve damage, Meniere's disease, TMJ, which is temporomandibular joint dysfunction, and many others. Hyperacusis, or loudness hyperacusis, is a phenomenon when noises seem grossly louder than they actually are to the person. NOXACUSIS is when people experience seething, horrendous pain from sound or noise exposure, burning, acidic, razor wire pain. Imagine someone pouring acid into your ear, or that the insides of your ears are on fire, is another common one that people use to describe it. So why is tinnitus and hyperacusis so important? Well, soldiers serving in the army come home with these disabling conditions. People who work in factories and other loud environments, they get them quite often as well. And more recently, a lot of young people have been getting them due to using AirPods and headphones every day, going to concerts with no hearing protection, etc., etc. It's a very disabling condition, and many people are not able to leave their homes due to horrible pain in their ears, tinnitus that gets worse and worse with noise exposure. Honestly, it's treated like a joke by society, and it really pains me that it is so. People do not realize how disabling these conditions can be. Tinnitus therapy, or TRT. This is the go-to method of quote-unquote treating tinnitus, and I mean every type of tinnitus, often recommended by audiologists around the world for tinnitus and hyperacusis, and NOXACUSIS, by the way, which gets worse with noise. What a multitude of these so-called specialists fail to realize is that there are some subtypes of tinnitus that can be treated. For example, TMJ, jaw issues. And these guys default to TRT and don't address issues that can actually help completely resolve the tinnitus. While other types that can't be easily treated can be made worse by TRT. More on that in a bit. TRT is meant to treat the underlying anxiety caused by hearing or tinnitus. It's not an actual treatment. No, it does not make your tinnitus quieter, unlike some people claim. The treatment can cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, and requires using hearing aids or maskers that can go for thousands of dollars as well. Now, anxiety never helps any chronic conditions, and addressing it as much as possible isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is that the anxiety is treated as the primary problem, instead of a result of the condition. No one with other serious illnesses would address anxiety as the main issue. Yeah, certainly for some people with very mild or maybe quiet room tinnitus that they have to focus on, anxiety can be a huge issue, but for more severe cases, it's not the main problem, definitely not. Especially hyperacusis, which is also treated by all doctors with TRT. Well, something like this existing can be a good thing, right? Well, first and foremost, it just doesn't work. It doesn't reduce tinnitus and can actually make your tinnitus or hyperacusis worse by constantly blasting your already damaged ears with more noise. Honestly, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. Now, if we talk about masking, it's not a bad thing, especially for milder cases, but severe catastrophic reactive cases, reactive tinnitus is tinnitus that gets worse with noise exposure, can definitely get worse from it. Now, do TRT specialists care? No, they don't. The pioneer of TRT, Paul Jastroboff, and other specialists, who I will name, a little bit later, gaslight severe cases, saying they're looking for attention, want monetary compensation, and loads of other nonsense. They say TRT works for everyone, and it has a 80% success rate. These people are suffering. They don't care about money or attention or anything else. They just want an actual treatment that actually does something. This man has put real research back by decades by saying there will never be a cure except for his, I would say, placebo nonsense. And he's gatekept the tinnitus treatment, I guess, from researchers since the 1980s. Now, if we talk about this 80% success rate, it's people whose tinnitus went into remission with time. Yep, that's right. You heard me correctly. An overwhelming majority of tinnitus gets better with time, which is very important for new sufferers to know. It doesn't get better from shoving overpriced hearing aids into your ears or doing other TRT nonsense. Jastroboff has taken these people who improve with time and hogged their success as his own. In Jastroboff's own words, tinnitus can't be cured. From a researcher's or medical point of view, that is just insulting. Why don't we stop research of stage 4 cancer treatments as it can't be cured? Or just stop research of trigeminal neuralgia as it can't be cured? Just have suicidal pain retraining therapy. That's it. How about cancer retraining therapy? Someone have severe hallucinations and delusions from a mental disorder? Why use medication? Just have schizophrenia retraining therapy to habituate to the delusions and hallucinations. See how stupid that sounds? Or how about this? Someone breaks their legs. Why do anything at all? Who needs physical therapy? Just have broken, mutilated leg retraining therapy to teach people how to live with chronic pain and not being able to walk. Jastroboff manipulated the medical community for decades and made tinnitus seem like nothing, like a joke. No one knows what it is. No one knows about how bad it can get. Young people continue using AirPods, going to concerts, not knowing what can happen to them. Hell, I didn't even know what it was before I got it severely. Before that, I thought it was just the sound of silence. It didn't bother me at all. Now, if we address the screenshot that's on my, on the screen on the video, there's a placebo-controlled study. Yeah, you heard me right. A placebo-controlled study basically showing that TRT is no more effective than placebo or standard of care, which basically is the equivalent of doing nothing and waiting. Actually, if people with mild tinnitus go to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy specialists, to address their anxiety, it's a much cheaper and less stressful alternative than TRT. Also using some masking if they don't want to hear it sometimes, yeah? So yeah, TRT doesn't work. It's a scam. And for some reason, it's still being peddled all around the world as the go-to treatment for tinnitus. Here's a list of things as effective as TRT. Telling yourself, I'm okay, doing nothing, juggling, eating potatoes, sitting on a chair, drinking water, listening to Tchaikovsky, playing football, dancing the Macarena, tightrope walking, rock, paper, scissors, watching YouTube, playing Fortnite, walking in the park, buying a shoe umbrella, buying a noodle fan, wearing a remote handler, walking in circles, getting a haircut, buying pre-peeled bananas, riding a Ferris wheel, having a pet rock. Now let's talk about victims of TRT, ENTs, audiologists, and gaslighting. There have been many people who have suffered at the hands of these quote-unquote specialists. Tinnitus that gets worse constantly with noise exposure, hyperacusis or painacusis, NOXACUSIS that is, quoting a friend, feels like my ears are being flossed with razor wire. Well, these specialists say that it's impossible. You can't possibly get worse from noise that isn't loud, right? These people must be mentally ill. And for those who don't have a treatable cause, Yeah, this is how we are treated by the medical community. Tinnitus that is worse than a quiet room squeak. Must be lying, must be mentally ill. Severe hyperacusis or NOXACUSIS. That's impossible. They are lying and mentally ill. Have you tried TRT? Medicine isn't advanced enough to understand why some cases are so severe and also get worse with time on their own or with minimal noise exposure. Defaulting to schizophrenia or some other mental illness, anxiety, OCD, is just wrong. An example is multiple sclerosis, an awful progressive neurological condition that I will not go into detail with, invisible, not researched, caused insane suffering. Must be mental, right? Psych ward and antidepressants. These people were blamed for overreacting. They were gaslit and treated horribly by the medical community, called hysterical. Thankfully, researchers have pulled through on multiple sclerosis, and it now has good treatments to stop progression. Imagine if all these sufferers with multiple sclerosis were told to do multiple sclerosis retraining therapy and to stop reacting to their degrading damaged nerve cells in their spinal cord and brain. Sounds ludicrous, right? Just because these conditions are invisible does not mean that we are lying or making it up. It's a serious problem that causes thousands of deaths from suicide every single year, because people just can't take it any longer. Imagine hearing this. All day, every day, at music volume, and it gets louder and louder and louder every day, every week from noise exposure or for no reason at all. Not to mention, noises sound 100 times louder than they are supposed to be, and you jump from every single noise. Even a plastic button falling on the floor causes you intense pain and causes you to jump in your own skin. Well, welcome to my life. Yeah, I don't think many people would be able to bear that, yet we do, and we are abused and gaslit by these specialists, that we are not trying hard enough, we're mentally ill, or that we're looking for attention, etc., etc., etc. Different severities of this condition do exist and should not be put under the table. Saying that, for example, a tiny little squeak in a room that you can hear in the silence is the same as a full-blown orchestra of 20 noises is just because of perception, or you're focusing on it too much. Yeah, I don't think so. Another thing these specialists do is they tell sufferers to take antidepressants and benzos, which, if they had done any tiny, minute amount of research, they would see that antidepressants, or raising serotonin, or SSRIs, are actually a very common cause of tinnitus and can actually make it worse. Same thing with benzo withdrawal. Kent Taylor, a wonderful, hard-working man, the CEO of Texas Roadhouse. He unfortunately got severe, constantly worsening tinnitus. He achieved so much in life, loved his family, yet he committed suicide because he could not take it anymore. He slept only 2 hours a night, heavily medicated, gaslit by ENTs and Jastreboff himself, that he was not trying hard enough to habituate. He did not see any other way out. This condition affects highly functional people who had stable, demanding careers and lives, people without any mental health issues of any sort, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and the list goes on. Gabby Althuis, mother of two, suffered from catastrophic, worsening progressive tinnitus and hyperacusis for 14 years. This strong woman steadily worsened for 14 years, raised her children, and in the end also couldn't take it anymore. She applied for euthanasia. Do you really think that a person would leave her 2 children behind if it was, quote-unquote, just a little ringing? The worst thing is that even after death, she is gaslit by ENTs, TRT specialists, that she didn't try hard enough. This makes my blood boil. Please watch the video that I will provide in the description about Gabby and her story. Glenn the firefighter. Glenn was working in a Royal Mail sorting office at the time, but he struggled so much with the noise of tinnitus that he had to sign off sick. By the following weekend, he was in so much distress that his wife Linda took him to a general hospital clinic. It was too loud and he couldn't bear it. After a failed suicide attempt, he finally hung himself after a few weeks of constantly worsening tinnitus. He was told by his doctor to do tinnitus retraining therapy. He was medicated with antidepressants, which made him worse. Not to mention his wife continued going to gigs without him after his condition appeared, which I'm sure didn't help in the slightest. And the list goes on and on and on. There are many, many others who have lost their lives to this condition, only to be gaslit by specialists that they didn't try hard enough. By the way, there are many cases of people committing suicide directly under Paul Gesterbov's care. What does he say? They are, and I am directly quoting him, white flag wavers. They gave up, refused to habituate. I guess by his logic, people with severe incurable diseases are just white flag wavers because they can't live with them, right, Gesterbov? This is an insult to truly severe sufferers, not to mention the so-called pioneer of tinnitus treatment, saying something like this. Why does he never mention these supposed failures, like he says? Well, because it would hurt profit, of course, knowing that his BS treatment is a scam and doesn't work, that is. The American Tinnitus Association. Boy, oh boy, you're in for a ride with this one. These guys have existed since 1971 and are considered the main tinnitus organization or the pillar of the community. What have they done since then to benefit our community? Of course, peddle TRT as the go-to treatment for every single tinnitus, accept millions in donations, not to mention over 2 million from Texas Roadhouse. All I see is an outdated website with minimal donations towards any sort of research. Your vacation on the Maldives and your new mansion doesn't count as an investment. I mean, for Pete's sake, these guys interviewed Julian Cowan Hill, a notorious tinnitus charlatan who feeds off people's suffering for profit. More on him later. I guess the only thing you guys can do is delete comments from your Facebook page of people criticizing you and asking where the money went, huh? Sounds like a very legitimate organization. Let's take an in-depth look at the donations they received and what they're doing towards developing a cure. Now let's take a look at this pie chart. This chart from charitynavigator.org shows that the program expenses are 46.6% compared to administrative, which is salaries for CEOs and employees. And that's actually pretty bad considering this is a non-profit organization. But now, let's take a look at the total revenue and expenses. Whoa! What in the world is going on here? The total revenue is $3.5 million in 2020 alone, yet the expenses here are a measly $739,000. Where in the world is the other 3 million, might I ask? Surely it went into research. I don't think Kent Taylor's former wife and children, after going through so much pain, would like to know that all their efforts and donations have gone towards some asshole's new BMW and Disney vacations. Now I really want to talk about some of the prominent poisonous people in this community, besides Jasterboff. First and foremost, I want to talk about Julian Cowan Hill. This certain gentleman claims that he supposedly cured his tinnitus using craniosacral therapy. He also claims, like most people do, that the only issue with your tinnitus is your fight or flight response or anxiety, which, in my experience, can be true for new sufferers, but often fades away on its own, or can be dealt with a good psychotherapist or CBT specialist, not by some quackery nonsense. Anyways, let me read you a little bit about this therapy. Craniosacral therapy, or CST, is a form of alternative therapy that uses gentle touch to palpate the synarthrodial joints of the cranium. CST is a pseudoscience, and its practice has been characterized as quackery. It is based on fundamental misconceptions about the physiology of the human skull, and is promoted as a cure-all for a variety of health conditions. Medical research has found no good evidence that either CST or cranial osteopathy confers any health benefit, and they can be harmful, particularly if used on children or infants. The basic assumptions of CST are not true, and practitioners produce conflicting and mutually exclusive diagnoses of the same patients. Pseudoscience and quackery is bad enough as it is, but also taking large amounts of money for it is even worse. Julian Cowan Hill provides consulting services, and as you have seen from some of the screenshots that I provided, they're absolutely pointless, regurgitating content from his videos. He doesn't care about people, and obviously he only cares about money, about profits. He has a book which is filled with more pseudoscience nonsense, and oh yeah, he also has an app that provides no useful information at all, and I think it's something like $30. Now let's talk about Lim Stops Tinnitus. Wow, I don't even know where to start here. This guy's picture is right next to quack and scammer in the dictionary. He claims so many things that I literally cannot show them all in one video, and I plan on making separate videos for this guy. The worst part of it is, I think he actually believes in his own nonsense, and he's so delusional that I don't even know what to say. Honestly, this guy has an ego of of a god, I suppose. He apparently had mild tinnitus in one ear for 4 years, then he lucked out and apparently it disappeared, so I guess this makes him a super awesome expert on tinnitus. Notice how his tinnitus disappeared after time? Yeah. He, like others, charges money for a course that is riddled with pseudoscience and tons of spelling mistakes. Some of his outlandish claims are cold showers will cure your tinnitus, dry fasting will cure your tinnitus, not eating meat will cure your tinnitus. This guy is so full of contradictions that I don't know how anybody can possibly believe him. His claims and his emails and videos sound exactly like someone promoting a pyramid scheme. Anyways, enough on this guy. Oh, by the way, notice that all these guys' claims are absolutely not backed by any research whatsoever. Keep that in mind. Now let's talk about... So, nothing much to say here. I would say she's the more evil clone of Julian Cowan Hill. She sells her courses for over $2,000. I think it was something like $3,000, I don't remember. But it was a lot of money to desperate people, and surprise, surprise, It's just more pseudoscience nonsense. Your money will be better spent going to a palm reader asking them how to cure your tinnitus for $3,000. It'll have the same effect. Oh, also, she turned off comments and likes for her videos, which is a very good sign that she is 100% legitimate. Now about Dr. Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson isn't nearly as bad as all these other guys, but considering he also charges copious amounts of money for consultations, group consultations, mind you, where he regurgitates phrases fight or flight, neuroplasticity, not to mention he's Jastreboff's disciple, I don't really have much respect for that. He directly claims in his emails that sound therapy lowers tinnitus, which is an outright lie. It does not lower tinnitus, time does. Again, taking credit for people's natural remission. Need I quote the paper again? The neuromodulation device Lanier, it just doesn't work. Not backed by any placebo-controlled studies. Made only for profit off of suffering people. I'll make an in-depth video about this thing in the future. Now, you're probably thinking I'm some sort of negative Nelly and I have nothing good to say. That's not true at all. If you first got tinnitus, you absolutely should not panic because a vast majority of cases get better with time. If you aren't careless, don't blast your ears with AirPods, earbuds, or headphones, or hearing aids, or over-the-ear maskers. Go to overly loud places, and just give yourself time, then you will most certainly be okay. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but if you have OCD or issues with anxiety, visit a cognitive behavioral therapist to address these issues. Do not spend your money on quack nonsense. Now, without getting too complicated, I'm going to mention some things to be hopeful for in the future. Dr. Thanos Sinopolis, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right, has research on tinnitus suppression using potassium channel openers. In short, his research has shown that mammals which show signs of tinnitus have dysfunctional potassium channels responsible for aberrant neural activity. The drug currently in clinical trials, albeit for a different cause, for epilepsy, Zen 1101, just so happens to open these particular potassium channels in the DCN, which is in the brainstem, responsible for tinnitus. Dr. Susan Shore is developing a neuromodulation device backed by 20 years of research that aims to stimulate overactive fusiform cells in the DCN, in the brainstem, responsible for causing tinnitus. She is currently having a double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial or study, unlike Lanier, that should be ending and releasing the results very soon. Deep brain stimulation is also an option. There's a few researchers working on deep brain stimulation for tinnitus, and the list goes on. Check out the Hearing Health Foundation, which is a good example of a place funding research. I will link the page for tinnitus and hyperacusis in the description. They'll list their grants on their website. Actual research into the physiology of tinnitus, not some psycho-nonsense babble. Now, please leave any comments or questions you have below, and I will very, very happily answer them.